My name's Ian Taylor and I work in the audio team. I'm an audio developer, specialising in doing sound effects, sound design, and I've been with Jagex since the early days. I've been here more than 10 years now, so I've seen RuneScape develop right from the very start and seen it grow into what it is now. My main job is sound design, but I also do composing music as well. I do a lot of creature sounds and atmospheric sounds and, well, basically any sound effect really that can be played in the game, as well as voice recording and integrating all this stuff as well. I've always been interested in computer games. I've made some basic games myself, sort of pinball games and various things like that. And I've been a sort of games player since I was a kid. So I had a lot of influences from all sorts of classic type games and stuff like that. And basically, because I had already done some sort of programming and that sort of stuff in my spare time, I was really given the opportunity by the creator of RuneScape to have a go and to see what we could make out of it. Because it was all being established, there was nothing really there in terms of audio in the early days, so we kind of had to come up with a plan, and it sort of grew out of nothing really. But obviously I've been playing keyboards for many years. That's my sort of love, synthesizers and music technology. And as I say, I did a bit of programming when I was a kid as well, so it was kind of relatively natural that I got into this kind of career. It's important that we kind of RuneScape had its own sort of sound, and the technologies that we were using were incredible for the time, but still relatively limited in terms of audio. So we had to sort of make the best out of what we had. And one of the ways we could do this was by writing sort of music that was sort of had relationships to each other, tunes that related to another tune, to a certain area and stuff like that. This was before we could do things like put sort of ambient sound effects of running rivers and birds and that farmyards and that kind of stuff. So we had to sort of sell the experience and the atmosphere through music, which meant writing a lot of pieces of music. Yeah, one of the best things about our team is that we can exercise our creative abilities. We're sort of relied on to do that, and obviously we work with the developers and designers to try and bring an idea across. But it's got to come from us, from inside ourselves. Absolutely, there's a lot of identity from me, in the game, as well as all everyone who works on the game.
My name is Mark Ogilvie, and I'm the design director for RuneScape. That means that I get to help shape all of the content that we make and make sure it's the best it possibly can be for the players. I celebrated my 10-year anniversary last week, and we were quite a small company back then. We were very much in the kind of realms of the startup company. I was staff member number 14, and obviously there's more than 400 of us these days. We were a very small company. There were only 2 or 3 offices in a building not too far away from here, and everyone was kind of getting their hands dirty really. Everybody was involved with every single update that we did. We had a very small number of staff who would look after our customers, look after password requests and things like that, and an even smaller team who are actually dedicated to developing the game. So it's a very free environment. We were encouraged to come up with our own ideas. All of the developers would have a very limited documentation procedure. So a lot of the ideas that we were coming up with, we would create using the tools and the systems that we had, see what was fun, see what we enjoyed, see what worked for the game. We were still experimenting with the engine back there as well. So we're all sort of commands and ideas that we were coming up with that the engine simply wasn't capable of doing. So we would ask for new requests, new script commands that the engine team could give us to make our content. Ultimately, as a designer, I want to make sure that all of my team have the capacity to put their own stamp on any of the content that they produce, so that the players can recognise the developers that actually made the content, but also so that we can make sure that we've got those kind of tendrils that connect all of our different pieces of content together and that they're working properly. If you've got the right people involved in the right projects, then you can make sure that you're being proper to the heritage of the game. You don't want to create a new storyline that completely treads on the toes of all the other storylines that exist. And if you think about it, we're juggling about 40 or 50 storylines at any one time. We use a lot of our own references to create the game. And that sometimes is just simply walking down the road into the middle of Cambridge and looking at the architecture that we've got. You know, Lumbridge, which is the kind of first place that a lot of players visit when they come to RuneScape. That's actually built around the concept of Cambridge. A lot of the artwork that you see there, the style of the castle, even the kind of orientation of the river, Lum, is very similar to the orientation of the River Cam through Cambridge. We have a lot of references to things like Windsor Castle, Buckingham Palace, with a lot of the architecture that we have throughout the game. There are also a lot of comedic references that we have within the game, whether or not that's traditional things that people would say is very British, like Monty Python, but I think you've got a bit of Red Dwarf in there as well, you know, and there are a lot of styles that we use are very British. Storytelling, for example, there are different styles of storytelling that you have throughout the world. I think the old school, gathered around the campfire, storytelling style that is fundamentally British, or very English or very kind of northern, we try to reflect that within the storytelling that we have in the game. We've been doing a lot more retrospectives as well, where we're looking more carefully at the changes that we've made in the past so that we can make the right decisions in the future. We've also recently been setting up a lot of surgeries or councils with the players, not just in-game, but also face-to-face here in the building. It's really important to me to be able to communicate to people face-to-face. I think one of the big problems of the internet is everything's text, and it's really impossible, it's almost impossible to convey emotions and things like that through text alone. And so I much prefer to work face-to-face with people and getting our PMods in to help us decide the right things about how we use our player moderation, the kind of powers that they have, talking to our various different groups of players, our fan sites, you know, doing these things face-to-face in the building, ideally via video links if we have to. But it gives me a better idea of what's going on, how the players are feeling about things, and how best we can make changes. Ultimately, if I get more passion out of my developers by giving them the freedom to be able to explore their creativity, then I'm going to get more passion from my players if we give them the ability to tell us what they want.
I'm Ash, I am a senior content developer and I create content for RuneScape. I started playing the game in about 2001 or 2 at university. And by the time I graduated, I was something of an expert on RuneScape. I was a forum moderator for Jagex. I knew one or two of the staff socially because, well, I lived in this city and met them. And I played RuneScape as my principal hobby. Applying to the company seemed like a natural thing to do since I didn't want to move out of Cambridge after graduating, and I joined the support team. From that, I was very fortunate. I was able to work my way up to quality assurance and from there to the content team, taking field promotions when they became available. I was very fortunate and the company has been very good to me in that regard. Initially, when I first joined the team, I was officially the uploader dealing with the version control for the team. On the side, I was nevertheless allowed to moonlight as a content developer. If I had an idea for a quest in the game, I would write it down, give it to Oggy, and he would, if he liked it, let me know and maybe give me permission to create it. And if he didn't like it, he'd let me know why. So while I was nevertheless a full-time version control technician, I was able to write 2 quests and launch them into the game like any other content developer would. I would be responsible for writing the story, planning it, working out where it would fit into the game, how the levels would balance against existing content. I would write the dialogue. I would talk to the artists about what kind of creatures I wanted. So if I wanted a troll who is a farmer, I'd ask for a troll with a straw hat or something, and they created an amazing little creature who was just scratching his bum all the time, because that was their idea of a kind of dumb troll who wants to be a farmer. We just collaborated on all that, talked to the audio guys about what kind of music I'd like, put it all together, and supervised the testing and talked to the players about it when it went live. I am particularly proud of the creation of the Wise Old Man. He is a character in RuneScape who is featured in various quests which I have written. He was originally put in just as a background scenery character. The idea was there was an old wise man living in this house, and if you talk to him, he might tell you interesting things about the world. We designed his house with, you know, a few accoutrements, a globe, a telescope, and it was pointed out that his telescopes seemed to be aimed at the nearby bank. And from that we got the idea that maybe he wants to rob the bank, as you do. So we developed his character, I developed his character, towards him being a corrupt and sinister person who's good on the outside, but inside he's the kind of man who would rob a bank because he wants the money. The players seem to have responded very well to this, partly because he didn't behave like normal characters in the game. He wasn't focused on the game's storylines, he was focused on himself. He used terminology that players used. He might say that something was pwned. He would talk about quests he'd been on in the same way that the player goes on quests. He presented himself as like you, but several years on, now retired. That went down quite well. We hadn't done anything like that before in the same way. And players found they'd sort of got a relationship with him that they wouldn't have with normal characters in the game. That came about sort of by accident. I can't claim to have come up with it all myself. It just evolved over time. And now the Wise Old Man is one of the signature features of RuneScape.
Hi, I'm Dave Osborne, Senior Narrative Designer, and I'm responsible for the story of RuneScape and the future story of RuneScape. We started off with a lot of stories, were kind of broad. We had penguins doing kind of farcical things in one area of the map. We had vampires doing more kind of darker, kind of almost real world themes like terrorism with the vampire state. And then we started to coalesce it into something about gods who were largely absent from the world and then them coming back. And that's what we're really looking to do with the future of our story. With Jagex and RuneScape, we're kind of individual in that the developer is very much the auteur. The developer is the designer, the writer on a piece of content. So they're very much kind of the creative vision holders for any story that happens. What we'll do is Mark, who is the lead designer, and I, perhaps, would come up with some bullet points and things we really want to do with the year and also potentially with a piece of content. Where the developer will take those bullet points and just expand it out and really make it their own. So we've got unique voices within RuneScape. So each piece of content will be something different and a different voice kind of really talking to you. With RuneScape, we aim for heroism and agency. So a player would perform all of the major protagonist tasks. So it is important the player isn't, isn't watching somebody else perform the main actions in the story. They're not given all the information by somebody else. They're very much the person in the driving seat, I guess. So that is one of the main things that we look to do, for example. With our tone, there's always a sense of comedy with RuneScape. That's the edge of colour, imagination and comedy with no matter what we do, even the serious content all the way to the more irreverent, farcical content. There is always that lining of kind of British humour that we try to put in there. We've decided that this year we're going to allow them to, or we're going to bring them into the decision-making process for the story. So we have, for example, one quest that we're going to bring out that will be decided between pirates, gnomes and dwarves. So the players will decide between those three races and they will get to choose how the narrative goes. And so because we have that installed player base, we've got so many people who are passionate, I feel that RuneScape is an ideal opportunity or an ideal place for them to decide how the story goes forward. So I give them kind of certain points in that story, certain points in that quest, where they get to progress it whichever direction they choose.
I'm Tim Chadfield, I'm lead developer. I'm involved in managing a group of content developers that script and create content for RuneScape. When I joined the company it was a lot smaller. I think it was more like 100 people. And even then, most of those people were with sort of the customer support side of things, and the actual dev side of it was a lot smaller. Things were very much sort of, I guess it relied a lot on the individuals that were working on the projects, in terms of you'd have a lot of responsibility put on one person's shoulders. It relied upon good recruitment to make sure that the skills of the people that we were getting in were particularly high. So it was, people would always, the developers working in the team would certainly have a lot of responsibility when it came down to sort of designing and developing and coming up with the ideas for the content. And that's still the case now to a fair extent, but as the company has got larger, there's been sort of more people to take on the various different responsibilities to sort of specialise in particular roles. I'd like to think that the quality level of the game has increased dramatically. The level of polish and the level of standards in the graphics and the gameplay and the narrative, we hold a lot higher, a lot sort of closer attention to detail. So yeah, that's had a fair effect, I guess. And we've also sort of including voiceover, more recently, which is something that we've not done for a long time. We'd only ever done sort of sound effects and music basically. So that's a whole new, a new dimension when developing a game. Obviously, it adds an enormous amount. When I sort of joined the company, if players wanted to trade with each other, it involved standing around in a bank, sort of shouting out what they wanted, or whether it was what they wanted to buy or what they wanted to sell. For potentially a long period of time, and then we had the inclusion of the Grand Exchange and sort of systems to make it just generally a lot easier for players to trade. I think that made a substantial difference. I think generally as well, in terms of the level of depth and of mechanics that we would potentially put into combat as well has changed. I think that when I first joined, RuneScape 2 had just sort of taken off. It kind of just sort of moved over from RuneScape Classic, lots of brand new systems have been written, and we were all just starting to get to grips with how to make the most out of those new systems. Over the years, the familiarity and the amount of sort of game engine commands and stuff that we've had has just meant that the amount of mechanics that we're able to put into the game has just increased dramatically.
I'm Darsan Raja and I'm the UI artist on RuneScape. I've been working for games for different kind of platforms, social games, mobile games and stuff like that. So I wanted to work for MMO, and this is the best MMO. And I just wanted to work on it, I just wanted to see, and when I came here, joined here, I just wanted to stick around, and I just really love working on RuneScape. It's very, very, very disciplined, and it's by far the biggest project I've worked on in my life, in my career. So that makes a huge difference. The team is much bigger, but different in every best possible way, really. So I quite like that. We do iterate and we do change. There's constant feedback, and we can make changes, but obviously we have to stick with the plan. We have to stick with the timetable. So in that amount of time, and obviously we also have to listen to what players think, and then we make changes after that as well. So there's always time. You have to take out time, and we make time for it. It all starts from the design, narrative, and then it comes to the concept art, and then we start working on how to make it work in game, because some of the concepts can be a bit radical, can be very over enthusiastic. I don't know if that's not the right word, but we have to just think of mechanics and how it can work, the limitations of content. So we have to work throughout with every single department in this floor to make something work, which is close enough to what was intention, like the intention from the beginning. So yeah, I have to work with everybody. All these artists have a different style. All of us have come with a different style, but we just work together to make the style consistent throughout. I don't know how that works. I really wish I had a simple answer to that, how we make everything look so consistent. Having so many artists, every single of us have a different style. But it works. I think it's a lot of collaboration. I think that's why, we get that result. So, yeah, I don't know how it works. It's magic, maybe the secret recipe for that, which I can't share, but,
Hi, my name is Mark Gerhard and I'm the CEO of Jagex. Prior to joining Jagex, I didn't know Jagex made games or browser games, and I remember when the headhunter said, "You really got to go see them. They're massive. It's like the largest browser game in the West." And I was like, "No, really, I play a lot of games. Never heard of them." And obviously, then I was like, "Wow, this is serious. This is." And I played the game quite extensively before I came in for my interview, just to know. And I was like, "This is good. This is really, this takes me back to, the Sierra games of King's Quest. I'm not getting this anywhere else." But I did very often try other browser games, and to me it was like, it was always I would have thought it was down to the limitations of Flash and things like that at the time, where it was all pretty 2D, pretty static, or you never got any particular complexity to your game environment with the browser games at the time, and you certainly didn't have any real 3D games. I think probably one of the things that are really distinct with us, or not distinct, unique versus others, is the fact that we are running the service, and it's really, it always has been games as a service. So it's you have the challenge of just producing engaging, fun entertainment, which everyone has, and then maintaining that kind of service to your customers daily, hourly. The RuneScape community doesn't give us a chance to say we're going to do 4 a.m. maintenance on our servers on a Sunday night, like a bank could. Everyone's sleeping, then we'll just upgrade our servers, or we're probably going to have 100,000 people online at any one point in time. So it's almost like we have despite being a game, I think we have higher SLAs for uptime, security, performance than you'd expect from a bank or any real epic enterprise. And I think but you're still a small company, relatively speaking. You don't have $1 billion infrastructure. You have $1 million infrastructure. But the expectation is that, and the service level is expected of that of a Sky TV or someone else like that. And for that you've got to be agile, you've got to be smart, you've got to be pragmatic, you've got to have great talent. It's an interesting challenge. I think on one level it's been great. This is kind of the world's best kept secret, and when your friend told you, like, wow, I just discovered something, and perhaps you had that, perhaps that was a better moment than when you've approached a product maybe slightly more cynically because it's already been advertised to you. I don't know. But I think we also missed out a bit as an organization to kind of really get players to understand what we're passionate about and what we're trying to do here, and the type of experiences we want to give them, and our commitment to it, and things like that. And that's, on one level, that's a shame, because perhaps that would have made it even more viral. I don't know, but I think we're balancing that out far better now, and we've got a great. It wasn't just radio silence as far as the industry was concerned. It was even as far as our players were concerned. We just said nothing. And certainly as far as the players are concerned, we're very, very involved and talking to them daily. From about 9 o'clock this morning, I was on the forums for the last 2 hours, kind of leading with one of the big threads we've got right now. There's a lot of debate going on there. It's very exciting, and that's a whole new level of dialogue, which I think people get. The transparency of what we're doing and who we are and all that comes across. And if I had to try and imagine, could we do what we do today without that? Probably not. So no, I think it's super key. On reflection, I really wish we had done it earlier. At the same time, maybe that was also part of what made RuneScape so special. We've clearly had to do a few unpopular things as well in our time. In response to a number of things, from risk to fraud mitigation and things like that, in terms of what we had to do with the wilderness, integrity of the game with bots, through to the longevity of the business with micropayments and things like that. And I think we've managed to make all those transitions reasonably successfully, because we've always set out very clearly why, and we've always been very transparent. And I think that's helped remove a degree of cynicism. I think there is for sure a popular sentiment against anything that is successful or commercial. And I think especially, kind of given recessions and other stuff, we all have pressures on our paycheck at the end of the month. So I think that's more acute. But at the same time, I think people still value quality, and people will still pay for that. And I think almost kind of counterintuitively versus the rest of the Western MMORPG industry, we haven't necessarily seen those same degrees of decline. And I think that is because there is still real value there. But at the same time, the team's double the size it was before, and the understanding is our production values have to be 2, 3, 4 times better what they were even last year, let alone 5 years back. And that's a tough one to reconcile, and I think it's as a business, because you're always producing content is very expensive, it's tricky. You know, it's will you love it, will you hate it? You know, and it's a very personal thing, and trying to calibrate that at scale is always fiendishly hard. So at the same time, the team do that very well, and have done that for many years. You can't please everyone. We always do our level best to try. We always try to cater for the best corner cases where we can. But the reality is, no matter what you do, there'll always be an element of dissent. I remember once where we gave free players some content updates and stuff like that, which hadn't happened for a good 5 years. All the investment was really the members game in RuneScape. And, you know, the forums were raging. It's like, you're trying to buy our loyalty, you know. And it was like, it's free. It's cool. Like, it's like, it doesn't, there are no strings attached. Like, we're trying to upgrade the game for you guys because it hasn't happened for a long time. It's like, you'll never win us over. You know, like, we're proud and free. It's like, that's cool. You can stay free. It's totally cool. And you're just like, wow. You know, even doing a nice thing can be met with some real heat, and that stuff like that puzzles me. At the same time, I kind of go, maybe that's just human nature, right? Maybe it's just popular to troll. Maybe the internet makes that or enables that so much more. And okay, it's so hard to draw conclusions from that. We've always just said, do the right thing. You know, kind of do the right thing for the long term, and we'll probably be rewarded in time.